Welcome to First Bite, our Detroit Lions preview podcast as part of the SB Nation Pride of Detroit Network. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the producer over at Pride of Detroit. You can find me at Detroit Online on Twitter. With me, co-hosting First Bite, as always, senior editor, Eldon editor, whatever you want to go with, at Ryan_POD. It's Ryan Matthews. How we doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
It's your show too.
Oh, I forgot that's how that works.
Yeah.
Sorry, I totally stole our guest thunder.
Well, yeah, let's get to it. It's Lions Seahawks week, which always tends to be a little wacky. I don't know, Lions Seahawks games. I mean, that's just part of the.
You're scarred.
I'm a little scarred. I was at that Monday Night Football game in Seattle that involved a batted ball, but I've been told that all Seahawks games are weird, so the Lions are just kind of a passerby here when in this rivalry. Either way, we'll get into all of that and more. We have to bring in our Seahawks guest. He is the producer over at Field Gulls. Actually, I want to say like we're producers in arms because we were actually hired on the same day. But Mookie Alexander is with us at Mookie Alexander on Twitter. Mookie, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, great to be on board with you, Jeremy and Ryan. If you think every Seahawks game is weird, and from what I've seen of the Dan Campbell era Lions, it seems like all of their games are weird.
Sure.
Boy, oh boy, is Sunday going to be one where I don't think they got a high enough broadcast crew for this. The distribution map should be a lot wider.
Yeah.
For a 10 a.m. kickoff, 10 a.m. at least out here. This should be the lead game on Fox because it doesn't always have to be good football for it to be really fun for the audience.
That's right.
They are really gonna ring in October just the right way. Like they're gonna kick off spooky season just the right way, I think.
Well, let's get into we'll cut this kind of in half the way we have all season. We'll start with what happens when the Seahawks have the ball and talk about spooky. Geno Smith has really surprised and shocked a lot of people with how he's played so far, and the stat that really sticks out to me is his completion percentage, and I know that can sometimes be a little bit deceiving, but 77.5% of his passes have been completed, which is 5% more than anyone else in the league. But his completion percentage over expected, which I think is maybe a little bit more telling, also by far the best in the league. So Mookie, what's happening? Is Geno Smith good?
I don't know if he's good much as he's better than he was when he was with the Jets. I was skeptical, of course, because what we saw of Geno with the Jets was bottom of the league stuff by any advanced metric, whether you want to use expected points added per play or DVOA or DYR. It was all bad for him. Now, in his defense, he wasn't supposed to be the starter as a rookie. That was Mark Sanchez's job, and then Sanchez got injured. Geno gets to be the day one starter, and the rest is history. But the way that he's performed this year is already exceeding my expectations. The turnovers that really bugged him throughout his time at the Jets, they've been kept to a relative minimum. He's probably gotten away with a couple of bad passes, especially in the Falcons game. But, some of the highest, some of the completion percentage success that he has had is down to the depth of target of where he's throwing. He's not throwing deep passes in the way Russell Wilson would, and we shouldn't expect him to. But the fact that his CPOE is pretty good, you got to think that a lot of the throws that he's made that aren't just, dump offs to running backs or something, they're genuinely good throws. He is making tight window throws. He's being a bit risky with the ball. And I think the Seahawks definitely like that. The fact that they're not pushing the ball down the field seems to be, at least according to Smith and even Pete Carroll, that teams are having two safeties back. And we're seeing that a lot around the league, and it's part of the reason why scoring is down. But within the context of the Seahawks, you have two viable deep threats in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And as we've seen, that's been a problem for the Seahawks offense when Wilson was the quarterback. And with Geno as a quarterback, the receivers haven't been able to really get any deep separation down the field and make big plays happen. They're pretty low in explosive plays. I think they only have 6 explosive passing plays all season. And a couple of them were kind of like busted plays where guys were wide open on a bad coverage mistake or something like that. But as far as I'm concerned with the way that Geno has performed, there's no reason for Drew Lock to be playing anytime soon. Like, his job is not under threat. As much as I think Seahawks fans want to see Lock because he's the younger guy. He's the one that was part of the trade with Russell Wilson. From what you've seen out of Smith, I mean, it's not like he's going to be a Pro Bowl level quarterback or anything like that, but he's showing competence. And I didn't think I'd be saying this, but through this 1-2 start, the offense has been the strength of the team, not the defense.
Well, you mentioned, Mookie, a lot of what Geno Smith has been able to do well so far. Can you touch on where he struggled, maybe what he does to put a cap on this offense?
Well, what he does well is, and it sounds, so simple, but he's performing within the structure of the offense. And I think part of it is the fact that the offensive line has really been good, at least out on the tackle side, and we'll probably get to that a little later. But he's been accurate. He's throwing accurate passes, and when he sees a guy open, he'll just fire it. He's not really hitching or being hesitant or making panicky decisions. And I think that's been a testament to how much he's improved his game over the years, that he's not throwing like caution to the wind and making really, really irresponsible decisions. I mean, he's thrown a couple of interceptions, but one of them against Atlanta was a desperation 4th and 18 pass. And it's just a case of trying to make a play. So I'm not going to knock him for that. So that's definitely been one of his strengths. And I know, just to talk about the completion percentage stuff, the advanced stats also show that Smith isn't just a mirage so far. I mean, we've seen Sam Darnold was an MVP candidate in September last year,
right?
But I think he's 10th in QBR. The team, I think the passing offense by Football Outsiders DVOA is 11th. So they've been an above average passing attack. And I think Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, has also played to Smith's strengths. So, a lot of easier throws that he can make, but also the types of throws that he likes to make. Passes in the seam, to the outside of the numbers, throwing to tight ends. So it's all gone pretty well on that front. But what we've noticed through the 3 games and one of his struggles, he doesn't sense pressure all that well. He is not a very elusive quarterback. So some of the sacks that he's taken, and he hasn't taken many, have been the ones that look avoidable, where if he could sense the rush, he'd been able to escape, reset his feet, do something else other than eat a drive-killing sack. And also, when teams have taken the tight ends away from the passing attack, the offense has really sputtered. So it's really important for the Seahawks to not get behind the sticks, because if they're faced in obvious passing situations, which is something they haven't had to do a whole lot of, that's where pass rushers, opposing defenses, can pin their ears back and really just start going after Geno and see what happens.
That's interesting, because I feel like that would play nicely into the Lions' hands. They're a team that really likes to send the blitz on those obvious passing downs, and the only thing that's been able to beat that is a mobile quarterback that can escape pressure. So if Geno Smith isn't that guy, that seems like an advantage to the Lions. But of course, they have to get into those obvious passing downs first, and that relies on stopping the run on early downs. And we do know that Pete Carroll likes early down runs, much to maybe some Seahawks fans' chagrin. Is that kind of still the case? Is this still kind of a run first mentality kind of Seahawks offense, or are they starting to maybe be a little more modernized these days?
Yeah. The shocking bits, I think, for many, and myself included, through 3 games, again, small sample size, but they've been a pass first offense, and they've led. They never trailed in the Broncos game, and they were exchanging the lead back and forth with Atlanta. They were down the whole time against the Niners, so I would tend to throw that out. But I think they're 9th or 8th in neutral pass rate. So their early down pass rate has been well above expected. And I think the moment that Wilson got traded and Geno was going to be the quarterback, well, even if Locke was a quarterback, the expectation was the success of the running game last year, combined with not having Russell Wilson a quarterback this year. Logically, this is a philosophical difference between Wilson and Carroll. Carroll wants to run the ball, establish the run.
Right.
We will see the return of the Stone Age offense, to use a pejorative term. And they've been passing early, they've been passing proactively, and it's been efficient. So I am blown away by how much that they've been willing to adapt to today's league and be willing to pass first. Now, I think part of why they've had to be proactive passing the ball is that the running game hasn't been good. So the offense has struggled to score, no doubt about that. They haven't scored a second half touchdown through 3 weeks. I mean, they scored a block kick touchdown, but that's it. The offense has scored 3 points over 3 games after halftime. But the ways that they are struggling to score, not the ways that people expected. They are being pass first. They're being very efficient on third down. Like, that's been another strength of Geno Smith. But the running game not being efficient or really all that reliable has been one of the disappointments so far.
I have some more questions about the running game because, as you mentioned, I think most people have this perception that the Seahawks are still stuck in the Stone Age, so to speak, when it comes to their offensive attack. But you look at the Seahawks running backs, and it must seem like at least a little bit of a I guess renaissance, so to speak, with Rashad Penny finally being able to be like the bell cow back that a lot of people expected him to be when the Seahawks drafted him in 2018. But I'm looking at their stats right now, Mookie, and they have 224 rushing yards as a team. That includes Geno Smith as well. But like 163 of those yards have come after contact. Does a lot of that does a lot of the struggles of the run game have to do with what's going on up front, or are the Seahawks backs just really trying to make the most of a difficult situation?
A lot of it has to do with the offensive line. Yeah, it really has flipped. All the talk about the Seahawks offensive line and how poor they've been with pass blocking, and normally their best years, they're really good at run blocking. Well, the pass blocking has been above average, at least to me. Maybe Pro Football Focus will disagree. But the run blocking, whether you use the run block win rates or PFF's grades, it's pretty lousy. I believe they're 31st in run block win rates, and that's terrible. And you go to StatHead or Pro Football Reference, they're near the bottom in yards before contact. So the running backs, for the most part, aren't having much of a chance. And, the fact that the Seahawks are pass first means it's not a case where, opposing defense is just loading the box and just selling out to stop the run. Even when there's been an invitation to run, they've not been effective at all. And I don't put that on the running backs. They've just not been able to find holes. And I think a lot of it is on the interior, particularly the center, Austin Blythe. He has struggled. And so is Gabe Jackson, whom Seattle traded for last year from the Las Vegas Raiders. And he's the veteran of the group, and he's been probably the worst offensive lineman of the five so far. And the surprises have been Charles Cross and Abe Lucas and how they performed in pass blocking. But the reason why their PFF grades aren't the best, and you can take PFF grades for what they're worth, but the run blocking has been a problem. And when they're trying to run between the tackles, they've just not been too many holes, not been too many opportunities for them to really get going. So essentially, Seattle's had to rely on Geno's arm. And while he's performed well, the limitations of Smith as a passer, particularly stretching the field and making intermediate and deep throws, is also hampering the Seahawks offense. They're not stalling on drives. They're not going 3 and out every other possession. But there are little things here and there that explain why they've only scored a handful of points through 3 games, and the running game is part of the reason that they've just not been able to put up more points on the board, especially in the red zone. Just 2 of 8 there.
Well, I feel like I somehow got stuck with this question, but I'm going to roll with it anyways. We do have a large Michigan State contingent in our audience, so I have to ask, even though I'm a Michigan man myself. How's Kenneth Walker look so far? I know he's only had 7 carries on the season, so maybe pushing back to the preseason. He seems like very much a Seahawks back, and I think even Aaron Glenn said that today. What are your impressions of him, and I guess maybe what are expectations for the rest of his rookie year?
Well, with Walker, he had a truncated preseason. He had a few carries against the Steelers, and then he had some mysterious core muscle injury or hernia, whatever it was. It's a rite of passage for Seahawks draft picks who were taken in the first and second round to immediately miss training camp or preseason with an injury. We could have an encyclopedia of the number of times it's happened over the last at least 6-7 years. But he didn't play the first game of the regular season. He did play the second game, and he had a couple of carries but wasn't terribly effective. The third game against Atlanta, he took a jet sweep and was able to make more yards out of it than he really should have. He turned it into a 21-yard gain. It was like a slalom run because he cut back against the grain, went across field, and he showed some of that elusiveness that was so tantalizing in college. So Penny is still the number 1 back until proven otherwise. And of course, Penny's got enough of an injury history to not be totally confident that he's going to stay that way. If I could say one thing about Walker, I suspect he's behind on the playbook because there have been 2 instances at least where Geno was either done a play fake or something, or maybe it wasn't an attempted handoff, and Walker's run to the wrong side. Oh. And for as long as that keeps happening, I think his snaps are going to be limited. So in the long term, I think that Walker will contribute in some ways, but it's still going to be Penny as the main guy. I like Kenneth Walker based on his college highlights. He looked absolutely electrifying, quick, shifty. But with the injury that he suffered and the time that he missed, it may take a while for him to catch up. And of course, none of this is really going to matter if the run blocking is not going to get any better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore about those Kenneth Walker highlights, especially the game he played against Michigan. So Mookie, I have
I can't. No,
what?
I'm not. I mean, the reason why he's not caught up on the playbook is probably his Michigan State education.
Oh, that okay. Wow. All right, talk about some dirty pool. Speaking of smack talk, in the news this week, DK Metcalf had some choice words for Jeff Okudah and maybe his I don't know, Jeremy, what do you want to call it? Maybe the overstatement that Jeff Okudah has become a quote unquote lockdown corner. Talking a little bit about, what you mentioned earlier, Mookie, a lot of these NFL teams and why scoring is down a little bit, a lot of too high safety looks and bracketing receivers and things like that. So I want to know, DK Metcalf, excuse me, and Tyler Lockett seems like a pretty good 1-2 punch. Anybody else in that kitchen in the Seahawks offense in terms of pass catching? I know that they got Noah Fant in the trade as well. They have Will Dissly. What have the Seahawks been able to do as far as their pass catchers?
Yeah, the pass catching situation, Metcalf, hopefully that's not a freezing cold take of his, because it feels like Okudah is starting to break out, because as I understand, he was injured in last year, right? Yeah. Or the year before, so he struggled to stay on the field. But
both years, really, yeah.
Yeah, and Justin Jefferson was a total non-factor last weekend, and I assume that a lot of it was attributed to Okudah's success against him. But for Metcalf, this has been an odd start to the season for him, because the average depth of target for him has noticeably dropped in each of the 2 seasons that Shane Waldron has been the offensive coordinator. And I've not liked the way that he's used Metcalf, almost like a possession receiver, and he's catching too many passes within a few yards of the line of scrimmage, and that includes when Wilson was the quarterback. That seems like the least efficient way possible to use Metcalf, especially those stupid quick out passes at the line of scrimmage where it takes forever for him to get going. Like, you got to get him going with his feet moving. If he's at a standstill position, you're not going to be able to go very far. Lockett remains as consistent as ever. He hasn't gotten into the end zone yet, but I figure it's only a matter of time. He's a reliable deep threat. He's basically all 3 levels of the field, whether it's the short passing game, intermediate, or deep down the field. His hands are reliable. He's not as fast as he used to be. And also, because of the broken leg he suffered a few years ago, he's been more or less been willing to just fall to the ground as soon as a player is near him. And I don't begrudge him for that whatsoever. But the Seahawks receiving core beyond those 2 is really, really not good. I mean, Marquise Goodwin is the default number 3 receiver, and he's had a couple of flashy moments. He picked up a big gain on a 4th and 1 against Atlanta. I think he had a big catch against Denver as well. But D. Eskridge, we're talking about Michigan. I think he's Western Michigan, right? So
yeah,
he's a bust. And I have no issue putting myself on the line to get freezing cold taked again, given my Josh Allen tweet from a couple of years ago.
I think everybody had a Josh Allen tweet from a couple of years ago, Mookie, so don't feel bad about that.
Yeah, but with D. Eskridge, he's had 2 catches for 6 yards this year, had 10 catches for 70-something yards last year. So he hasn't hit 100 yards receiving. He's hardly getting onto the field. It just seems like it hasn't worked out for him. And the fact that Seattle drafted him at 24 years old, the implication is that he should have been ready to hit the ground running, and it just hasn't been the case. So the tight ends have largely replaced the production of where the 3rd wide receiver would be. And it's been a positive. So you mentioned Noah Fant. He's probably been the least efficient tight end. I think he's got 9 catches for 54 yards. Those are fullback numbers. But Will Dissly, Uncle Will, got re-signed to questionable contracts given his productivity over the years and injury issues. But he's caught 2 touchdowns. He is that reliable target over the middle of the field, an area that hasn't really been challenged over the years given who Seattle has had at quarterback. But Colby Parkinson has been the pleasant surprise, because he was thought to be this big 6'7" target who never dropped a pass at Stanford. He would be another viable option for Russell Wilson to throw to, akin to Jimmy Graham, I guess you could say. But he broke his foot in year 1. He had another foot injury in year 2, hardly saw the field. He's finally healthy now. And he's had 4 catches on 4 targets for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. And all of his catches have either been for a first down or a touchdown. So we've been seeing Shane Waldron use more multiple tight end sets, going with 3 tight end sets from time to time. So, over the years, and you look at the target share for Russell Wilson, And the tight end percentage has generally remained the same. And even in 2022, it's not gone up that substantially. So you gotta tweak the numbers a bit. So I would do the portion of the targets that aren't going to Lockett and Metcalf, because you're not going to siphon targets from those two to go to your tight ends. And there is a 5% jump early on, like 22 of the 50 targets that haven't gone to Metcalf or Lockett have gone to one of the tight ends. And that's 44%. That's easy math right there. That's 5 percentage points higher than anything else I can find over the last few years. So that has been beneficial. So, in absence of a really quality number 3 receiver, the tight ends are going to be key for Detroit to stop.
Yeah. And Mookie, real quick, do you really find that to be a product of what they're doing to make Geno Smith comfortable in the offense in terms of the tight end usage?
Oh, absolutely. And especially off of play action too. Those play action boots. I know he hit one to Parkinson against Denver. He hit another one against Atlanta on the 3rd and 1 where Falcons sold out to stop Rashad Penny. Parkinson leaked out, and he probably could have had a touchdown if Metcalf didn't fall on his route and in an effort to block his man down the field. So I think that Smith is comfortable working with tight ends, regardless of where they are on the field. But it's good design by Shane Waldron to get him targets to guys who, are bigger options and seemingly have soft hands because they haven't dropped any passes.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how the Lions kind of respond there. Obviously, no Tracy Walker for the rest of the way, so they're still figuring out who's going to play safety next to Deshaun Elliott, and then their linebacking core has kind of been so in coverage when it comes to covering the tight ends. Haven't really been tested all that much yet, though, so I think this will be kind of an interesting, unique challenge for them. But that sounds like we got a good recap of the Seahawks offense. So we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about when the Lions have the football and that awesome Seahawks defense so far that has just been dominating opponents, right? All right.
I need an aspirin.
We'll be right back here on First Bite, previewing Lions Seahawks with Mookie Alexander. We'll be right back. Okay, let's take a quick break. Let me thank our new followers and subscribers. BC the Great, thank you for the follow. Nick the Greek, thank you for the 100 bits. Hot Soup, thank you for the 22 months subscribed to the channel. Says appreciate the content. Thanks POD for 22. You are welcome. Thanks for sticking with us that long. And then Nick the Greek with 1 bit. I'm not reading any of that. Cool. Before we get back into it, which we will in a second here, a couple quick announcements for the Twitch page. One, this is going to be our last stream of September, which is September on Twitch, which means it's 25% off gifted subs. I think 20% off regular subs. So if you want to subscribe to the channel at a discounted rate, this is the last day to do it that we're live. You can do it when we're off air, but I would recommend doing it now-ish if you want to get a shout-out. And then our Righteous Felon promo, which is also 20% off, ends at the end of September as well. So exclamation point... Ryan beat me to it. Exclamation point jerky will get you right there. I think that the discount code automatically goes in there if you want to get some delicious beef jerky. Click on that. I literally ordered my second batch today. Have you?
As soon as I get paid, I'm buying some more jerky. Hashtag sellouts.
That's right.
I'll show you sellout.
And then the last announcement is that I'm going to be out of office, so to speak, for the next 2 days, which means no Madden Sim this week. Sadly, I'll make it up to you guys in the bye week. We'll do a Madden Sim during the bye week, but no Madden Sim this week. Sorry if you were planning your Saturday mornings around that.
What we're gonna have to think of something good for the bye week.
Yeah.
In terms of like what we want to do, maybe like a Matthew Stafford on this Lions team versus Jared Goff on this Lions team.
Maybe. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll figure something out.
Anything's possible.
That's right. Okay, with that, let's get back into it. And we are back here on First Bite with Mookie Alexander, breaking down Lions Seahawks. Before it happens, the preview episode. Ryan, I'm going to throw the first one to you because big news-ish out of Lions camp here. DeAndre Swift, unless some active miracle, will not be playing in this game. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a little bit more questionable, but certainly trending towards not playing this week. Obviously, those are the two Lions' biggest weapons on offense, but the Lions have been doing a lot of good things in general, in terms of run blocking, in terms of scheming, in terms of spreading the ball around. So I guess even before we get into like matching up against the Seahawks, what's your confidence level that this offense can kind of weather the storm of missing its two best players?
I think answering that question is dependent upon how much you believe in what Ben Johnson's been able to do, right?
Sure.
And I think it's going to be really important, the kind of game plan that he puts together when you're missing quite literally two of the most explosive players in the NFL, in Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think what's encouraging is when we have seen some of the other players, some of the other skill position players get into the mix, it seems like Jared Goff just missed the deep shot to DJ Shark or just missed Josh Reynolds because he got clipped by Khalif Raymond or something strange that happens, right? So I have to think that this is the game where it'll be a really good litmus test for Ben Johnson and what kind of game plan he can come up with, because he's going to have to get creative, right? I mean, DJ Shark, Josh Reynolds, I mean, even those guys are banged up themselves, right? So you're going to be counting on Khalif Raymond to be playing some meaningful snaps, I think, in this one. And it's going to be Jamal Williams, carrying the rock, and Craig Reynolds, who, as a third running back, because the Lions quite clearly want to get all three of those guys into the mix when Swift is healthy. So it really comes back, I think, to Ben Johnson and what he'll be able to do. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess, is one of our favorite terms around here on Pride of Detroit. But yeah, I mean, what about your confidence level heading into this one?
Well, I mean, it almost feels like, well, they were starting to succeed with about this kind of lineup towards the end of last year, right? They didn't have a lot of these guys that are now gone anyways. But at the same time, Amon-Ra, I feel like, has been such a centerpiece of this offense that opens up so much else. Like, not only is he the guy catching the majority of the passes, but he's like a lead blocker on some of these plays. Like, he's important to the run game as well. And so the Lions are going to have to figure out a lot of different ways to succeed. So I think I think the way I look at it is like, this is Ben Johnson's first like huge test, because I think you have it right. Like, this is on him, and it's not an easy task for him. He's got a lot of shifting parts. He might not even know who necessarily he's going to have this week, especially with, DJ Chark gets downgraded today. Does that mean he's had a setback, or they're giving him rest? We don't know any of that. So it's definitely an interesting test. But here's the good news, and this is where we bring Mookie in. Seahawks defense, not so good by a lot of, maybe some would say all metrics.
What would some say, the Legion of Gloom?
Oh, boy.
Legion of Room. There's lots of room to operate.
All right. I like that a lot.
But let's start with the pass defense, mostly because that seems to be the worst of the two units, and it'll make me a little bit happier. I guess what's going wrong with the Seahawks pass defense other than everything?
This is just how the Seahawks have been for years now, and it's like in different ways, because this is a younger group than years past. So there's no more Bobby Wagner, of course. Jamal Adams, his absence, I think, has been very, very noticeable in the sense that his backup has been absolutely atrocious. But the pass rush, it always goes back to the pass rush. And ever since they traded Frank Clark, and I don't really care how Clark has performed or not performed in Kansas City, he was productive in Seattle. Since trading him, it has been a gong show trying to find any semblance of a consistent pass rush along the defensive line, because I think part of the reason they traded for Jamal Adams was he is prolific at getting after the quarterback from his safety position and coming down in the box and looking to blitz. But that can't be your solution. So that's why they've had to do these stop gaps, whether it's Carlos Dunlap or trading for Jadeveon Clowney. And it's had varying degrees of success. And the Seahawks, again, are not generating a lot of pressure. I mean, they sacked Jimmy Garoppolo one time and it was kind of on a semi-busted play and it lost no yards. They were already in the red zone at the time. They sacked Marcus Mariota 3 times. One was on a great blitz by Kobe Bryant. One was a strip sack, I think, a coverage sack, but Darrell Taylor's been one of the more disappointing players so far. And then another one by Quentin Jefferson. But in general, consistent pressure, getting quarterbacks hurried and forced to move out of the way, it just hasn't been happening. And then on the back end, they've not been running a lot of man coverage, despite Clint Hurtt's pronunciation. Hey, we're going to start doing more man coverage. We're going to change things up. They've seemingly changed some things up, but they've been running a lot of zone. I think that their man coverage rate is the lowest in the league. The corners are very, very young. Michael Jackson, I should say. He's been the unexpected starter. He had a strong preseason, and part of it was Artie Burns came to Seattle from Chicago. He got hurt. Sidney Jones re-signed with Seattle. He's been hurt, and now he's active again, but they're not playing him. Tariq Woolen, the rookie corner, who I guess reminds a lot of Seahawks fans of Richard Sherman with his athletic profile, but faster. He's played pretty well. He picked up an interception last week, his first career pick. He had the block that led to the touchdown against the 49ers, but I don't think the corners have been the issue as much as bad safety play, and that includes, as sad as it is to say, Quandre Diggs has really not been himself since coming back from the ankle break from last season. And I love Quandre. He has been great here. Seems like a real solid dude off the field as well, but he's been missing tackles. Josh Jones, the replacement for Jamal Adams, has been dreadful, and there's no two ways about it. And because Ryan Neal's been hurt, Jones has pretty much been the main backup at the safety spot, and he just misses too many tackles, bad in run pursuit, poor angles. It's just been a comedy of errors back there, such that half of all defensive possessions the Seahawks have ended in the red zone. And last year was just, death by 1,000 cuts. Running backs catching passes for 5-7 yards at a time. They're shipping in explosives like this is an Acme lab. And that's been the real bothersome thing, is they're giving up chunk plays both against the run and against the pass. Against the pass, maybe we should have expected, because that's been the theme for the last few years. And of course, with all the turnover on the passing side, the collapse of this run defense is just so damaging, because they're just struggling to get off the field. They forced one punt against Atlanta, and they've only forced 1 3-and-out total.
Yeah, wow.
There's a lot to unpack there, Ryan.
Yeah, just Mookie kept on throwing stuff, and I was like, man, I wish the Lions were at full strength. Is what I'm hoping, and hopefully they're as healthy as possible. But just a quick follow-up question about that secondary, Mookie. In terms of the youth that's back there, the Lions have a lot of big-bodied guys, like DJ Shark is 6'4", Josh Reynolds is 6'3", TJ Hawkinson is 6'5". Are those guys on the back end, are they equipped to deal with big bodied receiver? I know last week they had a big test in Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and it seemed like they held up fairly well, but then again, Cordero Patterson had 141 yards on the ground. So
they held up well in the sense that Mariota missed a couple of passes that should have been big plays. I mean, the very first play of the game, Kyle Pitts got behind Quandre and he raced past Michael Jackson. And if Mariota didn't overthrow him, that's at least a 50-yard gain. London caught the game-winning touchdown again. Josh Jones missing a tackle on 3rd down, and he's able to go into the end zone. So Tariq Woolen, I think he can handle outside receivers pretty well. He might even be able to be a bit of a thumper. He's 6'4". He's like 200 some odd pounds, but he's not like Cam Chancellor size. Otherwise, he'd be at safety. But he can keep up with guys because of his speed. I mean, that speed is absolutely legit. If you look at the all-22 of his chase down to Deebo Samuel against the 49ers, he's on the other side of the field and having to make a serious pursuit for a play that should have been stopped in the backfield. But at the nickel spot, Kobe Bryant, who we thought would be a potential outside corner, ends up being in the slot in place of Justin Coleman, who's another former Lion, and he's probably not going to play this weekend. He's still hurt. He's taken his lumps, that's for sure. He's been a bit grabby with receivers. Tight ends, I don't think have been a real problem for the Seahawks so far, as much as it's been, other receivers. And also the zone bust, I think a lot of it has been at the linebacker and safety spot. So that means bust, whether it's Jordan Brooks had a coverage bust against the 49ers that led to a touchdown for Ross Dwelley. Cody Barton had been fine the first couple of games, but he really didn't play well against Atlanta, particularly against the run. So there's just a lot of disorganization. And it hasn't, to me, been just a product of switching to a full-time 3-4 defense. People much, much smarter than me have noted that the Seahawks have been running a lot of nickel. And I've looked at some of the all-22 film painstakingly because NFL Plus's interface completely sucks.
Oh my God.
Give us the old Game Pass back, NFL. But I've just had to double check to make sure the Seahawks actually have 11 players on the field. It's been that bad. I mean, there is almost nothing that they do at an above average level except red zone defense. And that's where the bend but don't break mentality is something that irritates me because it feels like the Seahawks kind of have to do it. It's just not a super talented roster at the moment. There's some potential on the team, but what they are right now is really bottom 5 stuff. The red zone defense, I think they're 5 out of 13. So 5 touchdowns allowed out of 13 red zone possessions. They got a couple of fumbles at the goal line against Denver, but you can't rely on that over and over again. And that's where against Atlanta, the dam burst because they got to the red zone, I think 4 times and they scored 3 touchdowns. So if Detroit can move the ball in between the 20s effectively, you're in good position to score at least 3. It's just a matter of finishing off those drives. And it's more than possible with some of the ways that the Seahawks have been exploited, especially on the defensive front, because they're getting pushed around too often and they're being put in unfavorable alignments as far as stopping the run in particular, which is why I'm hoping DeAndre Swift doesn't play.
Yeah, let's talk about that because obviously I think the Lions' identity, maybe of their entire team, is that offensive line. And sure, they're going to be missing both guards in this game as they have every game so far this season, and they've still, top 3, I think, in yards before contact. So I guess, do you have an explanation of why the Seahawks run defense has dropped off so much? I mean, they were like second in the league we were talking about last year, and now, bottom 10 unit in the NFL. And it doesn't seem like much of the personnel has changed. So I guess I'm kind of baffled at it. Is it the scheme change? Is it just age catching up with some of these guys on the defensive front? What's going on?
Some of it seems schematic, but also that's not a particularly big front outside of Big Al Woods. Seattle's best defender through 3 weeks has probably been Al Woods, and he's 35 years old.
Right.
And he can clog up the interior just as well as he has over the years with the wide variety of team. He is basically the one unquestioned bright spot. I guess the second one would be Uchenna Nwosu, came over from the Chargers. He got a sack of Russell Wilson on opening day. He had a 2 fumbles forced, I think, and that's why he won NFC Defensive Player of the Week honors. But even he got picked on in the running game. There was a 40-yard run by Cordero Patterson where he overplayed it so much that Patterson had a massive cutback lane and it was off to the races. So they've just been too eager to get upfield and they're running themselves out of plays. Darrell Taylor, who was one of Seattle's bright spots last year as a pass rusher, this is the second year playing because he didn't play at all in his rookie season. There have been a couple of bad spots for him too. They're not setting the edges well, and they're getting beat everywhere. I mean, whether it's in between the tackles or on the outside, it's just been just abysmal. There have only been a few fleeting moments where the run defense has been impressive. And I'd say a lot of it was the second half of the Niners game, but by then they were 20-0 down. So the Lions offensive line, from what I've seen, looks like a top 5 unit. And if they're not getting a push up front, that'd be the Seahawks defensive line, then Jamal Williams could have a very effective day. And you combine Seattle's struggles on the defensive line, independent of Al Woods, Brian Monet and Poona Ford, 2 of the better run stoppers for Seattle the last couple of years, they haven't been able to get going. So if Jamal Williams can get going, Craig Reynolds can get going, the Seahawks have also had problems tackling. So what turns into 3-4 yard gains are turning into 9 and 10. So they just look so discombobulated. And this has been an issue the last few years, and then it corrects itself to something mediocre as opposed to rock bottom. But I think what's been irking Seahawks fans is that the worst part of the defense, at least to me, is the one that has a little bit more experience. That would be Darrell Taylor, who's been in on the team for 3 years, or Quentin Jefferson, who's back with the team. You've got Al Woods, has been a stand-up, but he's been a veteran of the team, and Nwosu has been around for a few years. So that's not a part of the depth chart that's been loaded up with rookies or anything like that, other than Boye Mafe, who might play this weekend an increased amount of snaps. And I've liked what I've seen from him so far. He's been billed as a Cliff Averill type of pass rusher. I hope that's the case. He sacked Garoppolo in week 2. But against the run, which was considered to be a weakness of his, he's made some good run stops against the run. So I hope that continues against Detroit. And one other thing, Shelby Harris, I've just seen, is practicing again. He didn't play last week because of a glute injury, and he also had some personal matter that was unspecified. If Shelby Harris can return, he's probably the one guy, the versatility to play on the end and on the interior. He could provide some extra pass rush and extra run support. I think that he could at least help the Seahawks get some semblance of a sound defensive game plan going.
Predictions, Jeremy, or you have another question?
I guess. Well, let me throw this to you, Ryan, because
okay,
Mookie's saying they're maybe a little bit vulnerable on the edges. They've given up some explosive plays in the running game. But the Lions have 3 running plays of 50-plus yards. 2 are by DeAndre Swift and 1 is by Amon-Ra St. Brown. So my question is, if they're looking for someone to maybe take advantage of that, is it possible maybe they get Khalif Raymond, one of their fastest players on the team, to work on maybe some of those end-around plays? Maybe Justin Jackson, another guy who's very speedy in there. Or do you think they just go with their bread and butter here and go with a guy that they trust in Jamal Williams a lot, and maybe Craig Reynolds is kind of that change of pace guy?
I think that what you're getting at is the Lions continuing to spread the wealth, and
right.
And I think that's what's probably going to happen. It seems like they're a team that wants to be multi-dimensional in the run game. And I think Khalif Raymond is a sneaky guy who might get a carry or two.
Yeah.
Especially like kind of moonlighting in that Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of role. Just because again, it comes back to Ben Johnson, and is he going to be able to scheme up something where he can tap into what these guys do well? And we know that Khalif has speed. So, let's get the ball in his hands and see what he can do.
All right. Well, then let's move on over to our prediction segment, the thing that we like to call the one thing we think we know, where we make a prediction about the game, not necessarily the prediction about the game in terms of the winner, anything about the game that you feel confident is going to happen. And Ryan, as always, you're going to kick us off after I think we both whiffed last week. If I'm not mistaken, I certainly did when I said Amon-Ra streak would not be broken. Of course it got broken. So you can blame me for that one. Live audience here.
I came pretty close. I said that Kirk Cousins wouldn't get sacked, and he got sacked once by Alex Anzalone.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move forward to this week. Ryan, what's the one thing you think you know about Lions Seahawks?
All right, now it might not seem bold based on everything that Mookie just said about the Seahawks run defense, but this might surprise a lot of Lions fans. Jamal Williams is going to get his first 100-yard rushing game as a Detroit Lion. He hasn't had one yet. And I think that this will not only be the week that he eclipses 100 yards, I'm going to say he eclipses 125 rushing yards.
Oh, okay.
I think he has and still, with that being said, as you said, Jeremy, they're probably going to get Justin Jackson in there. They're going to get Craig Reynolds some carries as well. So I think it's going to be an efficient 125 yards. So or more. But yeah, I think Jamal Williams has his first kind of like statement game. Like, hey, DeAndre Swift, I got this for now. Go ahead, get healthy, man. I'll carry the rock while you're resting up.
All right, Mookie, I'm going to throw it to you next. What's the one thing you think you know about Lions Seahawks?
Oh, the one thing I think I know about Lions Seahawks is that the fourth down discourse is going to be off the chain for this game, because
hell yeah,
think about Dan Campbell and the fourth down decisions that he has made during his time as head coach, and the decisions that he really should have made last week. And I don't need to rehash it with you guys.
No, you really don't.
The historic fourth down decision making by Pete Carroll, which surprisingly a little bit more aggressive this year, which is a pure troll job to Russell Wilson, obviously. But even last week, we talked about the Lions-Vikings. In the Seahawks-Falcons game, he went for it on a fourth down. They got a touchdown out of it eventually. But in the third quarter, the game's 20-20. And with 4th and 2 at Atlanta's 8, instead of going for it, he kicks a field goal after burning a timeout. And that ended up being huge as far as stopping the clock later on in the game. So from what I've seen, Dan Campbell likes to be aggressive on fourth down. Pete Carroll maybe a little bit more aggressive on fourth down than we've seen in years past. But I think, especially comparing the two defenses, one side might end up being not aggressive enough, and the other one is going to be aggressive, and that may very well determine the outcome of this game one way or another.
Someone's gonna have to check in on Ben Baldwin's spot after this game. Might go bonkers here. The one thing I think I know is that DJ Chark is going to have a breakout game. I feel like it's been teetering on the edge. We saw a little of a flash of it last week with, he got 40 yards on the opening possession, and then it seems like they kind of went away from him in the rest of the game. Him and Goff have been missing on a lot of these plays, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for Lions to air it out a little bit. And I know there's a mismatch in the run game as well, but I think the Lions would be wise to try to get some of these other receivers involved. Now there's always the opportunity that DJ Chark doesn't even play in this game because he didn't practice on Thursday. Maybe he did have some sort of setback, but assuming he does play, I say DJ Chark crosses over 100 yards in this game. And if not, if he doesn't play, just replace us with Josh Reynolds and pretend I predicted that.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely counts. I have one last question for Mookie, and I feel remiss that I didn't ask it at the beginning of the podcast, but how much of an emotional letdown do you think the Seahawks experienced in week 2? Because, I mean, they really got pounded by San Francisco, like in every phase of the game, but like they have that first game, it's against Russell Wilson. I mean, as you mentioned, like Pete Carroll's just doing his troll job of Russell Wilson at that point. But like, do we think, and they were in that Falcons game, that was a game that they just ended up coming out on the losing end. Do you think, because there's a lot of Lions fans who think that, oh, this is just such a winnable game for the Lions, like this is a game that they're going to win. How much of that do you think is actually a trap? Like, could the Seahawks team show like, hey, we're not the basement dwellers of the NFC West?
Yeah, I think that there was an emotional letdown because if nothing else, over the years, whether they've been a very good team, a great team, or a below average team, and this precedes Russell Wilson, the first couple of years that Carroll was head coach and Wilson was still in college, there's always that one game, and usually it's at home, where the Seahawks perform well above expectations and pull off some surprise result. You think of the Beastquake game in the playoffs in 2010. Nobody gave him a chance. In fact, we as Seahawks fans, some of us, including maybe a teenage me, thought it was better to lose week 17 for the draft pick instead of actually go to the playoffs. And then you go all the way to this year, and look, Denver looks like a complete clown show because of Nathaniel Hackett, but still, that was an emotional win because of who it was against, meaning Wilson. Some of it with the San Francisco game, I feel like the Niners defense might be the best in the league. So far, they're averaging like 4 yards a play against, which is absolutely phenomenal. But they were so bad on defense and so inept on offense that they were doing silly things like making DJ Dallas their backup quarterback for a day.
I didn't want to bring that up, man.
I'm still in disbelief that play ever happened. It was mind-blowingly bad. If they're going to be bad, don't be bad that way. But I think there was some sort of a letdown because that was a hypercharged atmosphere in ways that really that stadium hasn't been for a good while. And they poured everything into it. It was a high effort game. It brought a lot out of both teams, both Denver and Seattle, and they played better against Atlanta. Now, Atlanta's probably not a good team. They certainly played better offensively. Defensively, they were somehow worse. But if this game is going to be close, short of some magical defensive improvement, you got to keep an eye on the Seahawks passing offense because Geno Smith threw for 325 against Atlanta. They did open up the playbook, as it were. They didn't, keep the training wheels on and have them throw an assortment of short passes. He's willing to let it rip a little bit more. So you look at the matchup. Seattle has scored 3 points in the second half offensively all year. Detroit's given up 55 in the second half defensively. So this is, as put to me by a respondent on Field Gulls Twitter, the stoppable force meets the movable object.
Yeah. Well, that's Mookie Alexander. He is an unstoppable force, as is Field Gulls. I always like to shout out Field Gulls because I feel like they've been an example of what everyone on SB Nation should be. So, Mookie, I'll give you the floor here. Where can they find you? What can they expect on Field Gulls? Promote whatever you want here.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. You can find me on Twitter at Mookie Alexander. I also run the Field Gulls account. So if you want to heckle me there on Sundays, feel free to do so. We're going to have some fun. And you never know. It's an indoor stadium, so I don't think a drone can stop this game temporarily. As far as what we're going to have on Field Gulls, we'll have game preview and predictions and everything else. And post-game, winners and losers is always a very popular segment. If the Seahawks win, which, without totally giving away my prediction, I am not expecting. Enemy reaction has been a staple of Field Gulls for basically as long as I've been doing it. So Lions fans, if you're Pride of Detroit members, if you're in the game threads and you're commenting and Detroit happens to lose, smile, because I'm about to do a lot of screenshots if the Seahawks win.
If you want to get posterized by Mookie, head to prideofdetroit.com and then see it on fieldgulls.com. Mookie, thank you as always. Great stuff. Appreciate your time. And somewhat good luck. Good luck to you after Sunday. How about that?
How about you just hope no injuries for the Seahawks?
Yeah.
But I hope they get their teeth kicked in.
And no more injuries for Detroit, because we're very close to you two having to come in, for, and at least be on the practice squad for a weekend.
I mean, if they're looking for someone not likely to get injured, they are barking up the wrong tree, because I can't stand on my own 2 feet these days without injuring something. But anyways, enough about me. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back post-game Lions Seahawks Sunday night after the game, and then obviously all of our pregame stuff leading up into Patriots week, which that should be fun. But anyways, until then, thank you for watching. Thank you again to Mookie, to Ryan, and to everyone else. It's chaos. Be kind.